Hey guys, it's Shaylin, and I'm here today with another writing video. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about all my current writing projects. This is a style of video that I used to do way back in the day. If you were subscribed to me in like 2015 or 2016, you might remember this. Why do I have a hair elastic on both wrists? I took those down because, to be honest, I just went way too in depth on projects that I never ended up writing, and I didn't feel comfortable having such detailed accounts of like all the things I plan to write on the internet. However, since then, the lineup of projects I intend to write has changed dramatically. So today we're going to be doing kind of the same thing, except approaching it in a way that is safer for my intellectual property. So yeah, I'm just going to be going through basically all the projects I currently probably intend to write. I'll quickly talk about what they're about, but I'm mostly just going to be talking about what my plans are and where I'm at and like what stage I'm at with all these different projects. It didn't really make sense to do this in terms of how old the ideas are because the order would be really weird. So this is going to be in order of how much mental real estate the idea takes up in my mind. I would love to do a Q&A about projects that I'm working on, since I love talking about projects I'm working on. It's my favorite thing to do because I'm self-indulgent trash. All writers like talking about projects that they're working on though. It's not just me. So if you have any questions for a potential Q&A on my project, leave them in the comments, and if there's enough, maybe I'll do that. So let's get started with Honey Vinegar. No surprise that I'm talking about this first. I've been talking about this project constantly for years. So Honey Vinegar is the novel that I hope will be my debut. I have been working on this novel since 2018, the fall of 2018. This is a literary fiction novel with some subgenres being coming of age and folklore. I have a plot summary for this book that I'm just gonna read because I think that would be better than me rambling. It's 1954 in a remote town in northern British Columbia, and 13-year-old Sybil is reunited with the mother and half-sister Freya she's never known. Sybil is reluctant to welcome them into her world, but when Freya gets struck by lightning, Sybil narrowly saves her life. Rumors spread quickly. A legend begins to form around Freya's miraculous survival, and a series of strange events, especially the arrival of a plague, fuel the town's idea that something unworldly is happening. Sybil learns that a soft-spoken boy named Whisper has become the root of the legends, and with Sybil an obstacle in the way of his obsession with Freya, he spins her into the villain, portraying her as a mad witch doctor. A vicious rivalry ignites between them as one becomes a monster through folklore and the other seeks godhood through writing it. As the folklore is written, Sybil fights to protect herself and Freya as the threat of violence increases, and is faced with her ultimate choice to either become or defy the legacy that's been created for her. Honey Vinegar is a coming-of-age story that asks what it means for a girl to grow up in a world that sees her as a monster, and how can she reckon with the darkest parts of herself when she has already become a legend. I spent 18 months drafting it from the fall of 2018 to early this year, and I don't think a day has gone by where I didn't think of it. It's one of my favorite things I've ever written. The protagonist, Sybil, is, of all the characters I've ever created in the years and years that I have been writing and creating characters, she's probably my favorite. I hate to pick favorites, but it's probably Sybil. I love her dearly. She is such a piece of work. I believe the technical term is feral bastard. She lives rent-free in my mind, and it's been a joy working on this book. I really have just enjoyed it every step along the way. I'm very excited to move towards publishing it. So where I'm at with this book, I have finished the first draft. I've finished doing a round of developmental edits. At the moment, I have just like a few little tasks that I need to go back and do, like a couple things I need to research that came up while I was doing my edits, a couple little scenes I need to add, but it's almost done. So I hope to finish those little edits by the end of the year and then pass it on to some of my critique partners. And the goal would be to query this novel starting next year. It's very exciting. So moving on to my next project, which is the book I'm currently writing, which is called Holding a Ghost. I'm filming this during NaNoWriMo. I don't know when I'm gonna be posting this, probably not for a bit. I'm currently 20,000 words into the first draft of this book. This book I do not have a plot summary for. I'm not even gonna try to really explain what it's about because this book's not really freaking about anything. There's no plot. No, okay, I'll try. This book follows a young woman named Juniper. She goes by June. She used to go by Andy in very old versions of the book, don't ask. June was raised in a commune and has been living there with her younger siblings. Her mother passed away a few years before, and at the beginning of the book, she and her siblings decide that it's time for them to kind of leave their life behind, and they all move away to start school, and she ends up on her own starting school in Vancouver. I have a lot of fun writing Vancouver. It's where I grew up, so it's kind of fun to write a place that I actually know. Like, normally I write fake places. Holding a Ghost is actually set in like a place. Spent 18 years living. And Jim can also see ghosts, and she kind of bonds with a ghost in her house that she lives in. The ghost is the narrator of the story. It's the word that I don't know how to say. It's a Bildungsroman. Is that how you say it? I don't know. That word doesn't look like it is capable of being pronounced. There's a kind of a love triangle, romance, whatever you want to call it, and there's ghosts, and it's artsy, and yeah, nothing happens. Sometimes I'm writing this book and I will just stop and think, no one's gonna like this. Like, this is the kind of book that no one will like. But I don't really care. I like it. I think it's artsy and fun. I enjoy plotless coming-of-age novels with gay romances and artsy experimental forms. I would pitch this, if I had to think of some comp titles, as A Gate at the Stairs meets How to Be Both, is the closest I can really come up with on that one. This book I obviously have talked about in detail because it started as a different book. The book that this originally was a young adult novel that I started writing in 2015 and wrote the first draft of in 2015. And I outgrew that version, and so I ended up creating a new, just changing everything about it. Everything about it is different. I've talked about this in multiple videos that I will leave linked in the description, so I won't go into it again. But it's a completely different book now. Even the main character feels different. Like June, I call her June in this draft. She went by Andy in the old draft. Those are distinctly different characters to me even. They're the same person, but they're also different people. And it's just a very different book. I don't see them as the same in any way, but this is kind of like the final evolution of the Pokemon that is this novel. Is that how Pokemon work? Don't know when I will be done drafting this, but my goal was the end of next year. However, it's gonna be done way before that. It'll probably be done early next year. I mean, if I committed to it, I could finish it this year, but I think I've got other things I want to focus on in December. It's my NaNoWriMo project of 2020. So I'm gonna write as much as I write during NaNoWriMo. Probably it'll be around 40,000 words. Probably not work on it much in December because I have some other things I want to wrap up before the year is over, and then finish it in like January, February. And it's not gonna be that long of a book, I don't think, like probably only 60,000 words. It's told in a very like kind of experimental vignette style. The form shifts a lot, like some chapters are told in lists, some chapters are told in like transcripts. Like the form is really playful. It's told in vignettes, so it's very like kind of delicate and quite fun to write. I'm really enjoying it. I'm writing this book a lot faster than I thought I would be, to be honest. I kind of thought that I would be drafting this for a lot longer. So because I'm gonna finish it much earlier, I don't intend to start my next book for quite a while. I'll talk about the next book I plan to draft a bit later. Basically, I'm gonna have Honey Vinegar and Holding a Ghost both in the editing stage, and I don't want to end up having 2 books to edit while I'm also drafting a book. That just seems like a lot. So I want to just work on Honey Vinegar and Holding a Ghost and get them as edited as possible, get them to a queryable stage before I start drafting my next book. I just feel like I want to, I'm working on these books in tandem, these two, but I want to really get them done complete before I start drafting something else. I just think it would be really overwhelming if I keep drafting things and then my pile of books to edit keeps piling up. Plan to finish that early next year, work on editing it. I have no idea how long the editing process will take, to be honest. But yeah, I think this will be a big focus for me next year in terms of editing. So next up is Pareidolia, which is my short story collection. I have 2 short story collections. So this one is obviously short fiction. I would guess class it as like contemporary and surrealism. I've been working on Pareidolia for ages. I recently put up a whole video on how I wrote my short story collection, so you can check that out. If you want to know more, I'll cover it pretty briefly. I do have a plot summary for this one. In these stories, characters reach breaking points for themselves or their relationships. Twins burn down a house. A young girl confronts her infatuation for her best friend in an abandoned greenhouse. An astronaut falls through space. A girl raised in a polygamous cult tests her faith when she falls in love with her new replacement sister. A tutor watches his student drown and wonders how he will find it in him to apologize to her mother. A nanny is faced with the temptation to enter a mysterious garden. A nurse steals the heart of a patient she's obsessed with. A dishwasher tries to understand his attraction to one of his co-workers. A woman who eats live animals. The characters in these stories want things they shouldn't want, love people they shouldn't love, and do things they shouldn't do. Their desires twist their perceptions, which twists their realities. Pareidolia is a dive into desperation, panic, isolation, obsession, the desire to hurt others, and the desire to be hurt ourselves. So obviously I've been working on this for a long time, and I'm currently at the point where most of the stories are done, and I don't really intend to touch them until the point where I'm like working with an editor at the traditional publishing stage. Many of them have been published. If you want to check out any of the stories, you can read them in the description. Currently, my lineup of stories for the book: Kudzu Girls, Barefoot, Hold Me Under Till I See the Light, Beautiful Animal, Wishbone, Melting Point, Darling, I Fear for You, Cherry and Jane in the Garden of Eden, Solarium, I Will Never Tell You This, Symbiosis, and Peon in Space. I worked on this collection for like 4 years. It's was a labor of love, and it's the love of my life. There are just like a couple stories that need work. The only ones that need a bit of work are, I guess Melting Point could use some line editing. Darling, I Fear for You needs a pretty big edit because at the moment it doesn't make logistical sense. Symbiosis needs a rewrite, and Peon in Space just needs some little edits. Other than that, the stories are all wrapped. My goal is to finish up those final tasks next year and have that one locked and solid, and I think I'm pretty set on what stories I want in it. So next up is my one YA project, Someone Will Save You. This is a young adult contemporary novel, and it's one of the oldest projects on here. The idea I got in like 2015. And I wrote the first draft in 2016. I don't think I have a plot summary for this book. It'd be good if I did, because then you don't have to hear me ramble. Okay, so I haven't read this in ages, so I don't know what's in here, but let's hope that this is coherent. The day Luna Clausen witnesses her childhood best friend, Evan, commit suicide, she finds a postcard with this message on the ground: "Send me a letter if you need help, and I will save you." Signed with the name Finn and a return address in Australia. Her occult mother has always believed the birthmark on her face to be a bad omen, but after the suicide, she believes Evan's spirit is haunting her. Bullied by her Pearson's childhood and unsure how to tell her boyfriend of 2 years that she's asexual, fearing the effect this could have on their relationship, Luna is desperate for someone to talk to, someone who won't blame her problems on a demonic presence, someone she can talk to without risk, and so she answers. But as their relationship shifts from pen pals to makeshift therapy to manipulation, Luna's left trying to figure out who this anonymous person really is, but by the time she does, it may be too late for the damage to be undone. That's not very good, is it? I wrote that for a class years ago where I had to write a query letter for this book, and yeah, that's not amazing, but it gets the point across. You get the gist of it. I love this book dearly, but I can't say I think about it too often. I think it's not like at the front of my mind, even though every time I read it back, every time I do think about it, it warms my heart. I'm very close to this book. It was very important to me, like personally, emotionally, what it meant to me. It still does mean a lot to me. Obviously, I wrote the first draft in 2016. I finished a rewrite of it last year. The rewrite is still a mess though, like structurally it's a mess. I don't have intent to edit it anytime soon. The thing with this book is because it's young adult, I don't really intend to have much of a career as a young adult writer. Like, this could be the one YA book I ever publish. It wouldn't make sense for me to publish this anytime soon, because it would be like, here's my YA novel, I'm never writing one of these again. Maybe I will write one again in the future. I don't know. I don't know what the future will hold. I don't read YA. I don't really consume YA. I don't have intention at the moment, or don't think I'll ever write another YA novel. It's going to be untouched until I have an agent, and I think I need to have a conversation about this book with a future agent. I don't feel a draw to edit the rewrite right now. I don't feel a rush to, so I'm focused on other projects. It's just in the drawer. When it's time to work on it, I will edit that. I know what I need to do, I think, with that redraft, even though it's a freaking mess. For several years, probably. Won't be looking at this one. We're gonna talk about a couple books that I intend to draft in the future. So at the moment, I talked about how I don't want to start drafting anything until Honey Vinegar is basically done, and Holding a Ghost is, I'm not sure, but at least deep into the editing phase, because I just think it would be too much to have too many books on my plate. Like right now I'm writing Honey Vinegar and Holding a Ghost kind of in tandem, like weaving one to the other. These two books I think will be the next kind of stage of my life. Like when Holding a Ghost and Honey Vinegar are wrapped, I will kind of work on these two in tandem. So the first one, I don't have a finalized title for, but the working title is Lambs Playing God. I don't know, something about that title feels slightly awkward to me and it doesn't really work, but I've been unable to think of anything for it. So this is based on a short story that I wrote called Hold Me Under Till I See the Light. If you want to read that story, it is published in the New Quarterly, linked in the description. When I started writing that story, which was at the end of 2018, I knew from the very beginning that it would be a novel as well. It was always my intention for this to be both a short story and a novel. I really saw both narratives from the beginning. That story, Hold Me Under Till I See the Light, is probably my favorite short story I've ever written, and I'm very excited to turn it into a novel. I'm really excited about what I have planned for it. I find the characters really interesting. I do have a plot summary, but again, it's not very good, so don't judge. Rainy isn't supposed to leave Blessing, and she doesn't want to. except for a few rare excursions to a nearby town, all orchestrated by her scarily independent and vivid older sister Iris. She's never left the polygamous community she grew up in, until the summer of 1974. This is the summer Rainey turns 15 years old. It's the summer she's set to be married, and it's the summer Iris tells her she's leaving their community for a new life. But before she runs away, she finds Rainey a new replacement sister, an enigmatic girl named Jude. Jude is Rainey's first window into the real world, both its hardships and its freedoms, which reveal themselves to her as her feelings for Jude become more and more complicated. But her marriage to her betrothed, Gabriel, is drawing nearer, and when Iris leaves, Rainey finds herself stuck between the world she wants and the world she knows, as she realizes that neither is safe and the world she dreams of may not be possible. I pitch this as The Girls meets The Virgin Suicides. It's also literary fiction, coming of age, LGBT, which I think is what all of these are. So I just like writing gay coming of age stories. Everything I've written for this book, like little excerpts, little scenes, just to play around with voice, I'm very excited about. The tone really excites me. I'm very interested to start writing this one. Maybe I will start writing it probably late next year or the year after. I really have no idea, honestly. Time will tell. It's not really anything I have concrete plans for. I'll start it when I'm able to start it. If you want to know more, I feel like just check out the short story and you'll kind of get a good idea of what this one's about. So the project I intend to write after that is called Winter Houses. This one, like Holding a Ghost, it has a very long, complicated story, which I talked about in a video that I will leave a link to called Reviving Old Ideas, I think. So this was also originally an idea from 2015, but that idea just kind of disintegrated with time. It went through a bunch of evolutions as I kept just changing it because I was never happy with how the concept was being built. The idea itself was super amorphous and kept changing, details kept changing. But what did become clear to me was a main character who I really cared about and who I think is really, really interesting. Actually, it was about a year ago, I kind of started to see the book in a different light and decided to do the same thing I'd done with I'm Fine / Holding a Ghost, where I just take the elements I like from a project I no longer like and turn it into a book that I like. This has done a huge transform. The plot is entirely different. I think the aesthetic is kind of similar, but like the world is different. All the side characters are different. It's pretty much all different, except for the main character. I basically see that old version of the plot as a really long exercise to help me uncover this character, who I think is so interesting. I feel like now I finally have kind of like the optimal form to showcase the character, which is really exciting and only took 5 years to get there. So I pitched this as Twin Peaks meets Eileen. I've never actually seen Twin Peaks, so maybe that's not accurate. This is a literary fiction with like crime noir post-apocalyptic elements. I do have a plot summary for this book, so I will just read that and then we will move on. In an increasingly isolated world, Heidi Volkova gives few any reason to notice her. She speaks only to her co-worker at the morgue, the sardonic, death-obsessed cat, and a man she refers to only as Mumblety, and the two relationships are thin and held at a measured distance. She keeps her apartment lights off even when home and spends her evenings making taxidermy out of roadkill and watching films alone. Queen shit. When a local girl is killed with seemingly no suspect, evidence, or motive, Heidi finds herself implicated as the culprit by everyone around her. Mumblety, the only person who could confirm her whereabouts that night, reveals that he's married and accuses her of fabricating their affair as an alibi. Kat romanticizes her into the perfect killer and becomes obsessed with her fantasy ideal of Heidi as a sociopathic, beautiful femme fatale. As questions such as her sudden arrival in town 5 years before and her lack of a documented past beforehand come to light, paranoia swirls around her, and Heidi herself begins to question her involvement in the death of a girl she's never met. I hope that that sounds good. So this is definitely an interesting one for me because, like everything I write, it's literary fiction because I don't really know how to write things that aren't, because I don't know how plot works. But I think it draws in a lot of elements. Like obviously it has that crime noir element, kind of like Eileen, and it's actually set in like a post-apocalyptic kind of alternate reality, which is kind of in the background, but like, I don't know. Thought it would be interesting to set a story in an apocalyptic world where the apocalypse is not the focus of the story at all. I call it like softly apocalyptic because like it's apocalyptic but like not entirely apocalyptic. I'm excited about the way that I think the form and the narrative voice is going to go. Obviously I think the character is super interesting, as I already mentioned. So I think this is going to be a fun one that I plan to write when Lambs Playing God is done. Definitely a lesson learned for me is do your developmental edits before you start drafting the next book. That was a mistake I made with Honey Vinegar. I started Holding a Ghost right after, before I'd done my developmental edits. And it just is really overwhelming to have to switch back between those two things. So from now on, finish the first draft, do the big developmental edit, then start the next draft. So after that is my second collection, which I've titled Forgive Me, I'm on Fire. This is also short fiction, contemporary surrealism with some kind of genre bendy stuff, similar to Pareidolia. I don't have an order, obviously, for this one yet because I haven't written all the stories. This will just kind of be an ongoing thing for the next many years, as short story collections tend to be. I just kind of write them as they come up. They're nice, like, you know, if I need a break from my novel, I write a short story. However, I've already made way more progress on this collection than I would anticipate. I've written way more stories for it than would even like, considering I haven't even published my first collection. So I've got two more novels that I'll talk about briefly. They're both kind of in the distant future. The first one is Bird Behavior, which is actually one of the older ideas. I'm just in a weird place with it. This is based on my short story Symbiosis. There was a period of time where I was so excited about this novel, and I loved the short story. At the time, the story was like my favorite thing I'd written, and I really wanted to expand it to a novel. I'm not too happy with the short story. There was a period of time where this was a huge passion project and I couldn't wait to write it. I even wrote the beginning for a class and I had so much fun writing it. I'm not as excited about it as I used to be because I don't like the short story that it emerged from. I intend to rewrite the short story fairly soon so I can put it in Pareidolia. I think one of two things will happen. Either I will rewrite the short story and feel like now that the story is in its optimal form and is actually strong, I will feel at peace with the idea and no longer feel a need to write it as a novel. Or rewriting the short story will kind of reinvigorate my passion for the story and I will realize that pursuing this as a novel is something I still want. This one is not really on my radar. I'm not worried about it. If I come back to it in the distant future, that's fine. I love the world of it. I think I just don't have a ton of passion for it right now. Maybe just because there are other ideas I'm more excited about. I always enjoy writing this though, so I'm sure if I did start writing it, I would have fun with it, but it's not like something I feel the need to write now. And then the final idea I'll just cover super briefly. My working title for it is Words for Hunger. If you saw the series I did on the Reedsy channel a few months back on how to develop a book, this is the idea I used in those exercises. I'm not going to really talk about what it's about. There's a con involved. The main character, Percy, really interests me. I think she's kind of like what I'm clinging to. She's a giant piece of garbage, which is very exciting to me because I love writing characters who are just trash humans. She reminds me of Sybil in some ways, so I think by the time I get to the point where I'm writing this book, which will be many years from now if I end up writing it, I'll be really itching to write someone who sucks because it will have been a while since Sybil. However, I will say that this idea has been through the ringer. Normally when I get an idea, the aesthetic of it is very clear. This book, I feel like I haven't been able to figure out like what it looks like and where it's set, and that has changed a million times. I initially got this idea in like May and it's shifted like 87 billion times. I think I'm finally settling on a concept, but I have no rush. I feel no rush. I think there's some things about it that excite me, but I've struggled to settle on how I want the book to look and just even how the concept will be kind of arranged. So this one is not one I'm really thinking of too actively. Eventually, many years from now, if I need a novel concept, this one will be sitting in the drawer. So that's really all for this video, guys. If you have any questions about these projects, again, you can leave them in the comments. I'll try to get to them. Other than that, if you have any questions, you can always send me an ask on Tumblr, and I'll see you in another video.